Yeah. All right. So the crux of the show can now get going here on Law Dog Sports, the Weekend Big Show. Chuck Ramsey, Jeremy Schroeder, and we want to welcome Berry Tramel, now of the Tulsa World, with us here on the program. Barry, thank you so much for joining us today.
You bet. Sorry, I'm running late. I apologize.
That's okay. Way better late than never. And
And these people are just tired of listening to us catch up.
exactly. So I think you may know Jeremy, as I mentioned to you in the email thread. I remember seeing you at Jeremy's father's funeral. You knew Leon and
Oh yeah.
Pat, from
I went to church with Leon and Pat forever and ever and ever.
yeah. So
Followed
Oh yeah, I
Jeremy.
remember your brother being the pastor at the church I went to as a child, and remember your dad. Remember him fondly.
Yeah, and I followed Jeremy's baseball career. His mom and dad always kept me up to date on it. Really proud of him. So
that's
uh,
awesome.
great to reconnect.
Yeah. So, Barry, we do this podcast. We've actually done this show since 2018, just to kind of get you caught up. We are novices, but we're not your typical daily sports radio appointment. But we made it through the pandemic, and now I'm doing radio in Western Oklahoma. But we do this program, and I think of it as I want to try to interact with as many Oklahoma sports legends as I can before we get out of here. And, I'll say this, in the 90s, I might have taken exception with you over some articles at times, looking through crimson colored glasses. But I mean, you've really stood the test of time in sports journalism here in the state. And, I appreciate you coming on. And how are things at the Tulsa World?
Well, they've been great. Just treated me royally. I'm having a blast getting to do most of the things I've always done. So that's a blessing. And, with the internet, of course, the reach of journalists can be a lot more than it used to be. But it's still cool to go to Tulsa and meet new people and
Yeah.
connect with people in the town. And, we still got a substantial number of people who get the paper and pick it up and put it in their hands. And so that's great to connect with those people. Thanks to my radio work, most people across the state who are sports fans have a working knowledge of me, even if they haven't read me. So I think it's a great match, I think it's a great connection, and I think we're going to do great things together.
Well, and Jeremy and I were talking, and this goes back to his time playing sports in the 90s, and even I grew up around Tulsa in the 80s. Uh, they really, and not to besmirch your former employer, but the prep coverage was always a little higher end from the Tulsa World for their area than what we had around here. And maybe that's because of the proximity of the college. I don't know, but now the way things have been, and I used to do Friday night finals for iHeart. I got most of my material and content to try to run with from the Tulsa World. But like you said, with the internet, shoot, Jeremy and I did a radio show in Wichita Falls, Texas, because of the internet. So that does make it nice. But so you will stay in Norman, but make the trip to Tulsa for obviously things that are going on. I'm assuming.
Yeah, they've allowed me to stay down here and live down here, and this puts me great proximity to cover the Sooners and the Thunder and the Cowboys. There's about the same distance as if I was in Tulsa to Stillwater. So, yeah, I'm going to be doing most of the same things I've been doing, and that's what's great. I was willing to try something new, and I try a new endeavor with Sellout Crowd. It didn't work out, but it was a great landing spot at the Tulsa World. I was interested in doing something different and something new, but I really didn't want to cover anything new. I didn't want to all of a sudden, become a business writer. I didn't want to become a political writer and spend my days at the Capitol. I didn't want to move out of state or even out of my hometown.
Yeah.
So this is, just a wonderful opportunity, and I appreciate the world giving it to me.
Well, and just so we may have some listeners here on the pod that aren't totally familiar, you started with the Norman Transcript, correct?
Right. 17 years old, 1978.
Wow. Okay.
Exactly right. I was a senior in high school.
So
What year did you leave the transcript? Because I seem to remember when I was in high school, you still being with the transcript, and
Yeah,
that would have been
91.
93. Okay.
91 was my last year at the transcript. 13 years I was there, Jeremy, and
Okay.
covered OU and high school sports extensively. I covered every Norman High football game of the 1980s. I missed my senior prom because I was in at a Norman High baseball game. All the players were playing as fast as they could so they could get the game over with and get to the prom. And I appreciated it, not because I needed to get to the prom. I had to get back to the office and write my story. I had a deadline. So, yeah, I ran into Stan Abel the other day. Hadn't seen him and hadn't talked to him in probably 30 years, but covered OU wrestling extensively in the 80s. And of course, football. The very first OU football game I ever covered, 1979 Iowa. That was Bob Stoops' playing debut for the Hawkeyes. So we sort of
Awesome.
debuted at the same time. So, I mean, it's been a great career. Heck, I mean, I'm so blessed. I could not have asked for a better ride. And I hope it continues for a good long while.
I can't see why it wouldn't, because really, to me, when you're talking sports and you're talking sports analysis, I know there are and I'm in my 50s, Jeremy's in his late 40s maybe.
I got one more year.
But I hear these young people on the air, and we go full blown Statler and Waldorf on this show a lot. But there's a lot of kids that can reel off stats, they can reel off history. But I mean, I reached out to you because you sent out a feeler for anybody who was at the 2000 OU Nebraska game. That's 24 years ago.
Yeah.
Oof.
That's a long time. That's
It is.
the age of a
It is
lot of
a
these
long
guys
time.
getting on there talking sports. And so, to be there and to have seen it, to me, brings a connection that you can't get just reading about it or looking at the stats of the game. Now, I did have to look at the stats of the game to kind of remember what I saw, but I do remember it was a heck of a day. If you're
I
just
just remember the pepper spray coming out after the game when the people rushed the field.
and did Josh Heupel get a little bit of that?
Heupel and Stoops were
collateral
being
damage?
interviewed right down there in the south end zone, and when the pepper spray came out,
I think it was actually a Moore police officer who would shoot the cayenne dispersal. But anyways, so Berry Tramel here with us on the Weekend Big Show, and I said to myself, I read enough about the sellout crowd thing on the online to really, it wasn't anything I wanted to go in depth with you on that. And trust me, you've got my support on your end of that whole deal. But the funny thing about it is I was telling Jeremy, that formula of what was laid out would be very enticing, and it looks like something that could kind of revamp media in an area like Oklahoma City and maybe even Tulsa.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a good concept. It was just terribly executed and underfunded, and a lot of business mistakes were made. A lot of decisions were erroneous. But the concept of getting, some prominent media together and cover a place like Oklahoma, that's rock solid. And I loved my years at the Oklahoman. I was at the Oklahoman for 31 years, 32 years, 32 years at the Oklahoman. Loved every day of it.
Sure.
Consider it, basically my journalistic home. You guys are too young to remember Carlton Fisk, but let me tell you, Carlton Fisk, let me tell you about Carlton. I always thought of myself as Carlton Fisk because he's an iconic Red Sox. Hit the 75 World Series home run where he wills the ball fair and wins Game 6, and just a New England icon. And then he left in free agency and went to the White Sox.
Yep. I think I remember that.
And here's what's crazy. Here's what's crazy. One day I was reading the sports page and they had a story about Carlton Fisk, and he had played longer for the White Sox than he played for the Red Sox. And when I read that, I was stunned because I think he played 11 years or so with the Red Sox and then another 12 with the White Sox. And I thought, man, those poor people in New England, that had to rock them when they heard that news, because I just couldn't wrap my eyes or my mind around that. And when I worked at the Oklahoman, longer than I worked at the transcript, it struck me like it struck me about Carlton Fisk. And that would have been about, I don't know, 2005. And then I worked there 18 more years. So, so when I think of, you know, when my journalistic chops and name were made, it was the Oklahoman. I love the Oklahoman.
Yeah.
But I just saw this deal, and it was enticing, and got to work with people I wanted, and I knew it was a risk, but we decided to take it. It turned into a disaster for reasons that didn't have to be a disaster. But, you know, I'm just so blessed that I was able to come out of that professionally and land on my feet. And my hope is that all my colleagues do the same. Some have, and some are still working on it, but hopefully we'll all be back in the saddle soon.
Well, and you know, it's funny because two things: the Oklahoman you left resembled none of the Oklahoman of your days. Real, I mean, to me, your first your first 25 years there.
Right.
The
Oh yeah, it's changed. Yeah, no doubt about it. Everything's changed. Talked about the high school coverage. You know, Oklahoman was great at high school coverage, but a couple things have happened in the last several years. Not just the Oklahoman, papers all across the country. Deadlines have been moved way up.
Yeah.
So getting high school coverage in the paper from events doesn't happen anymore. The only place it really works is a state tournament, day games. Sometimes you can get in the paper, and that's common throughout the country. Austin, Texas, their deadlines are 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Kansas City, something like 4 o'clock. It's just, you know, just completely different. And then the other thing, the Oklahoman, we did away with our Saturday edition. We don't even have a Saturday paper. So you want high school football,
Wow.
in the paper, it's not going to be there. You got to go, you know, it's going to be online. So that's the one thing I like about the world. The world is still in there fighting. The world still produces a paper every day, except to select holidays and things.
Sure.
And then also the deadlines are still manageable. We still get night games in the paper for both college and high school.
Mm-hmm.
So the high school coverage, it's not like it was. No one has the staffing. When I started the Oklahoman, I'd walk in, if I covered a high school football game, and I walked into the office at 10:30 after getting back from Carl Albert or Moore or Yukon or someplace, we'd literally have 20 people sitting there doing nothing but answering the phone.
Yeah.
Taking scores.
Yeah.
If you remember the glorious old page in the Saturday Oklahoman, it was a full page of agate, the tiny little type, with every box score in the state or close to it.
Yep.
And it was it was like a journalistic miracle every week. And you know, nobody's able to do that anymore. We have to get our stuff from someplace else. And when I say we, fans, if you follow high school football, you got to get that stuff somewhere else. And frankly, some of it you can't get any. Some of it's been lost. But the one thing that the Oklahoman can do, and the world can do, and other people can do, is try to tell stories of the high school kids and the college athletes, and as good as they ever did. And I think most people are still trying to do that. I know the Oklahoman was when I left. I know the world is still today. So that's what we're trying to do. The world's doing a great job of you know, getting as much in as they can, like the old days, and the Friday night stuff and the Saturday night stuff. It's the world's still in there kicking, and the state should be very appreciative of that, because it's not easy in this day and time. The economics have changed, the logistics have changed, and the technology has changed. So, and frankly, the readership has changed.
Definitely.
You know, people talk about how newspapers have changed. One reason newspapers have changed is because the readers have changed. You know, even some of our savviest readers, some of our most loyal readers, they love these things right here, and they're doing that all day long. And it's not just 16-year-olds doing it. It's 56-year-olds.
It's a lot. Yeah.
So those are some of the things that are going on.
It definitely. And you know, you talk about Friday nights. When my time on Friday Night Finals with iHeart, you know, they would tell me stories about back when they used to have to call the police departments in a town.
Oh yeah, I've done it. I've done it.
Say, hey, can you find out the score from your officer out there at the game? And so my last 2 seasons with Friday Night Finals, I just thought, you know, really all I'm doing is broadcasting the scores that I collect off of Twitter and Squirtle. You know, I mean,
Right.
it's just,
That's exactly right. Yeah,
and that's a service, I guess, but it's not like back in the day. But you know, we still would go in depth with certain games and talk to whoever would be willing to come on and talk. And you know, to me, I do play by play now for Weatherford High School, and to me, the content that people can get from the local play by play guy has a lot to do with it. But more about you, Barry. Just a couple of questions that we had sent in. Most thrilling moment you've seen personally in your sports coverage?
I would say I'll give you 3. It probably spring immediate to mind. I probably could make a list of 300. This this is not necessarily a soothing moment for OU football fans, but the Boise State Fiesta Bowl, you know, just unbelievable. I mean, it's just crazy, crazy. You know, if you remember, Boise State dominated the game and looked like they're going to have won. You know, OU comes back at the end and ties it with about a minute and a half left. Boise State gets the ball and throws an out pattern.
Pick six.
Marcus Walker picks it
Yep.
and makes a game what should have been a game-winning pick six. It was going to be one of the biggest defensive plays in OU history. And OU goes up 35-28 or 28-21, whatever it was, go up 7. And here comes Boise State, come back and ties it at the end. Gets I'm
Hook and lateral.
I'm going to have trouble remembering
Statue of Liberty
which
play.
the hook and lateral was the regulation play.
Yes.
Yeah, that sent it to overtime. That's right. So then we go into overtime, and we have the halfback pass, the tailback pass for the touchdown when OU was up 42-35. Boise throws the tailback pass for a touchdown, and then the Statue of Liberty play for the game-winning 2-point conversion. Here's how crazy that finish was. You know, this game's ending it. It was 11 Phoenix time, so it was midnight.
Yeah.
It literally ended right at midnight, Oklahoma time. And we had great deadlines back in the day, and my deadline was midnight. So I was literally writing that story up, and I needed to punch the button as soon as the game was over. I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, you're having to write something that you don't even know what's going to happen, or anyway. So I don't know what I wrote, but I kept my job, so it was at least legible. And in what was it? I think it was University of Phoenix Stadium at the time, but I can't remember the name. But you know, the new ballpark at Glendale, the indoor Cardinals stadium. The press box is fairly high up, which is good for football, but you're in the severe corner. So a lot of times they're coming at you, and when they're coming at you, you can see pretty good. When they're going away from you and they get to the far end zone, you're just sort of guessing at what happened or watching on TV. And
Sure.
And of course, I'm watching with one eyeball because I'm writing and all this. You know, when I found out that overtime touchdown, the tailback pass, do you know when I found out that was actually the tailback and not the quarterback that threw that pass? Because if you remember, they sent the quarterback in motion, and that threw everybody off, and they snapped the ball to the tailback, and the tailback threw the pass. You know when I found out the tailback actually threw that pass?
After the 2-point.
On the media shuttle back to the hotel.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm sitting there because I just,
Uh-oh. We froze up.
That's one. Big Country's half-court shot against Missouri in '93 at Gallagher-Iba. they literally blew the roof off
Yeah.
of Gallagher that night. And I was courtside for Bryce Drew and the Valpo shot at the Myriad.
That was a heck of
That
a
was awesome.
That's three that comes to mind. I could make 100 just from the Thunder,
Yeah.
probably 50 from Kevin Durant, but that's three that came to mind.
I worked security for the NBA during the 2012 finals, and I will say that there was an error about that whole thing, and obviously the results didn't go as well as what Thunder fans had hoped, and I'll always attribute it to a severe overconfidence by that young squad. But after the game one win, that was pretty electric in that place, and to win at least one, to not be swept in an NBA finals. I guess it's small achievements that go along. But hey, guys, I froze up on my end. Were you all still hearing each other there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was hearing Jeremy fine. Yeah.
Hopefully it recorded. Barry froze up as he was talking about the halfback pass. So it came back and you were on to Bryant Reeves. But anyways, just real quick, Barry, just one article that you look back on and wish you could pull back.
Oh.
and I don't even mean like you were wrong. I mean, just maybe want to take the heat that you faced or something.
Yeah, I never did mind the heat too bad.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have been right more often. I generally, like when OSU hired a coach, or OU hired a coach, I was generally pretty supportive. The only coach that was hired that I thought this is not a good idea, and I sort of said it in print, was Howard Schnellenberger. And I turned out I was right about that. However, I ended up loving Howard Schnellenberger. He's been my favorite person to cover.
Really?
Just because he's so dang interesting. He loved the media. He wanted the media out there. And he had great stories. He'd be willing to share them. I shouldn't say my favorite person to cover. Eddie Sutton would have been my favorite to cover. But my favorite interview would have been Howard Schnellenberger. I probably should have been more forceful because I knew it was a terrible idea. I mean, total outsider and older. He's only 59. He seemed 89.
Oh my goodness.
But he's only 59 when he was hired, but he was completely inflexible. It was not a good hire. Just didn't work at all. So I probably wish I'd been more forceful when I wrote about Howard Schnellenberger at the outset, saying this is not a good idea, because that's how I really felt. I used what I would call soft techniques. I remember I wrote a column, 20 questions about Howard Schnellenberger, and 2 or 3 of them were was Ara Parseghian not available? That kind of stuff. So that may be one I remember. I don't know. I didn't regret too many things.
Can I make that the name of this episode?
Was Ara Parseghian not available?
Yeah.
I also used Duffy Doherty. You guys are too young to remember Duffy Doherty, but he was a coach at Michigan State in the 50s and 60s, and then he did some college football TV. But yeah, guys like that.
We've got a listener who would know Duffy Doherty to a T.
Yes.
I'm sure that's right.
Yeah, Michigan State fan on the board. In fact, he's commented, and he actually asked who was the most memorable person you ever interviewed. I guess you could probably say you can answer that, or you can go with the Schnellenberger answer.
Oh, well, Herbert Walker Bush, when he owned the Texas Rangers and he was a super guy, just couldn't have been more accommodating. He was late in the dugout at the Rangers one day. I tell you, another guy that was just splendid was Bum Phillips.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me, guys. This was late in his life, and he was down at a Dallas Cowboy training camp when Wade, his son, was the head coach.
Okay.
And Bum Phillips coached at OSU in the 60s. He was on the staff at OSU in the 60s and into early 70s, I think, even. But anyway, Bum was a great guy. And he's wearing blue jeans and a button-up shirt and then a cowboy hat, sitting in a golf cart watching the Cowboys practice in San Antonio. And I went over and just introduced myself. And if you read the transcript of what he said to me, you'd think he's being a Weisenheimer. I said, "Hey, I'm Berry Tramel from the Oklahoman." And he just looked at me and said, "You're from Oklahoma. Isn't that something?" And if you read that, you'd think this guy's just. But he thought, "Hey, that's pretty cool. You're from Oklahoma." And he sat there and just chatted, talked about old OSU days and Houston Oilers stuff, and he just was a charming, charming guy.
I figure anybody who went through the Bear Bryant Junction days has got to come out on the other end being
probably so.
You made it through the worst. So
anyway. He'd be Bum Phillips would be up there, no doubt about it.
Wow, that's cool. When I asked you about the article you wish you could bring back, I was hoping you'd go the John Blake Taco Bell article, but
yes,
we made reference to that several times here on the program, talking about
that one was rock solid at the time, and it remained rock solid. That was
you're right.
That was solid truth right there. I'm going to stick. I don't want to pull that one off the shelf.
Did you do much coverage on minor league baseball throughout your time, or were you predominantly?
Every once in a while, I'd go out there. I never really did much on it. I love baseball. Or I did love baseball. Still love the history of baseball.
Sure.
I don't know. You guys can see my office behind me.
Yeah.
I would guess there's well over 1,000 books right behind me, and it might be 3,000. I haven't counted them, but they're just, I got tons of books, and the subject on which I have the most is baseball.
Yeah. Yeah.
I probably got, I'm sure I've got 400 baseball books right behind me. So I love baseball.
Yeah.
But I tell people I didn't leave baseball. Baseball left me. That's what I say.
I think that's fair.
When the steroid scandals hit and the numbers became unreliable. That's one of I love the records. By the time I was 12, I knew most of the major baseball records. I can still recite most of the greats of the old days, their lifetime batting average. Whether it was Ty Cobb 367, although I think he's gone up or down because they've found some new statistical stuff. But Ted Williams 340, Joe Jackson 357, that kind of stuff. Anyway, I love that stuff. But when it became, you couldn't rely on it. When Brady Anderson goes from 9 homers to 46 in 1 year, I just said, this is getting out of hand. And when Manny Ramirez is hitting 540 home runs or whatever I don't know what he ended up with. I just sort of lost interest in it. I find the modern game very unappealing. It's very few balls in play. We all like home runs. I've written about the majesty of home runs and all that. But the truth is, the 3 most boring plays in baseball are the walk, the strikeout, and the home run. Because literally nobody's doing anything except somebody's throwing, somebody's swinging, and then maybe somebody's jogging. And the best plays in baseball are when the ball is hitting the gap or the ball is hitting the hole.
Yeah.
Or somebody's stealing a base and all kinds of people are moving and the ball's going somewhere and the fielders are going somewhere. And that's when baseball's at its best. And we don't have much of that anymore.
Well,
and
I think the double play is something
the double plays are wonderful. The double plays are a great thing. And I left baseball long before this, but I would have left it even more so a couple of years ago when they outlawed the shift. And they literally have become, we talk about governmental overreach.
Well, there wasn't enough of it in the 90s when then all the steroid guys run
Yeah.
rampant.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's right. But
It's not against the
they're
rules of the
literally
game.
they're literally telling the defense where they have to stand. They literally are saying, "Hey, you can't stand there. You got to move over here." That is so. I mean, I assume you guys realize this, but baseball positions are artificial.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing.
They're
There's
not
nothing
locked in a
magical
spot.
about that patch of grass to the right of second base, or that patch of dirt to the right of second base,
Yeah.
or three. I mean, if you want to play 4 outfielders and 3 infielders, why can't you play 4 outfielders and 3 infielders? If you want to play 6 infielders
Yeah.
and dare somebody to hit a fly ball,
I think you can still do that in late game situations, can't you? Bring everybody in.
yeah, I think so, but I don't. Just the
called that
whole notion, the whole notion that these guys don't want to hit the ball to the left side of the infield.
Yep.
We call
So
it Joey Gallo doctrine on this.
Oh my gosh. I
yeah,
was telling Chuck earlier, I turned on a game and I noticed the bases were huge and it just really rustled me. It just bothered me. Why are the bases so big?
yeah. So that kind of thing. It's just, it's not. And we all say that what we grew up with was the best baseball. You know, when people of every generation have said that. But truly, I think when I was a kid in the 70s, you had guys hitting home runs. You had George Foster hit 52 home runs, and you had guys, you know, doing Reggie Jackson hitting 49. You had guys doing remarkable things, but you also had you had these base stealers. You know, you had Lou Brock and Ricky Henderson and guys doing this, and you had a different. It seemed like more varied and widespread things going on, and now it's all pretty just home run derby, and
Ricky
so
Henderson.
I just don't follow it much anymore.
Ricky Henderson is one player that I did not appreciate during his playing time that now I look back and I'll see.
He was,
and what
yeah,
I'll
he
see
was-
is tweets
was
talking about
dynamite.
his accomplishments, and you'll never see that again.
well, he's
Nope.
cuckoo. There's no doubt about that. One of my favorite, one of my favorite, one of my favorite moments in baseball is when I can't remember what milestone was it, his 3,000th stolen base or 1,000, whatever it was. Wouldn't be 3,000, whatever it was, became the stolen base leader or whatever. And they stopped the game and he stands on, I think he's at third base is what he stole. And he's sitting there, he holds the base above his head and they got a microphone on him. And he makes some statement about thank you for being here for, when he basically threw laurel wreaths on his own head saying the greatest of all time. And that very night, Nolan Ryan threw his either 6th or 7th no-hitter.
Yeah.
So
Oh my gosh.
Ricky's spotlight lasted about 4 hours. And then he got upstaged by Nolan Ryan, which was, thought that was great.
We're visiting with Berry Tramel, now of the Tulsa World, formerly of the Daily Oklahoman for years and years, and also Norman Transcript, a legendary sports writer here in the state of Oklahoma. Dan Narva, our super fan up in Michigan, says that Duffy Doherty also had Chuck Fairbanks and Bob Devaney on his staff.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. I wrote this years ago. I did part of the Sooner Century book, and when OU went to the Wishbone in 1970, Barry Switzer, trying to salvage the season, went to Chuck Fairbanks after losing to Oregon State and said, Chuck, we got to scrap this veer. This isn't who we are, what we are. We got to go. Switzer tried to get Fairbanks to move to the Wishbone in the offseason. Didn't do it. He liked, Bill Yeoman came from Michigan State too. But anyway, Bill Yeoman had invented the veer. Chuck was enamored with the veer. Switzer says in September, after losing to Oregon State, we got to switch. We got to go to the Wishbone. And Chuck went home on a Saturday night after that game, and early 2-3 o'clock in the morning, he called his college coach, who was not Duffy Doherty. It was the predecessor at Michigan State, Biggie Munn, one of my all-time favorite names. Biggie Munn. And Chuck Fairbanks calls Biggie Munn and says, hey, here's what Switzer wants to do. What do you think? And Biggie Munn says, hey, listen, you got to do whatever you have to win. Don't be afraid. If you know what you're doing is not working, don't be afraid to switch. And that gave Fairbanks the confidence to give Switzer the go-ahead. They changed college football history. So yeah, the Sooners, they need to salute the Spartans, because Michigan State's connection absolutely helped the formation of the wishbone. No doubt about it.
There's got to be a connection there, because our super fan Dan Narva is probably equally a Sparty and OU fan, and then there does seem to be so many connections there, even beyond Keith Nickel. But but Barry, just a few more questions real quick. You know, you're talking offense and for the Sooners, and there's been a veritable, you know, quite a array of offensive coordinators in Norman. But I would have to say, going from 98 to 99, in which the transition was Joe Dickinson to Mike Leach, had to have been one of the most interesting times in all of college football.
Well, going from anybody to Mike Leach would qualify. I don't want to single out Joe on that deal. But yeah, I give Stoops a lot of credit for bringing in Leach. You know, you asked me what I'd like to take back. One of the things I whiffed on was when they hired Mike Leach. I mean, I didn't know anything about Mike Leach, and I didn't think he's a bad hire or whatnot. I just said, you know, this is middle America. You know, we got hot weather, but it turns cold by the end of the season. I don't know that you can win by just going all out passing. And of course, it took Mike Leach hardly any time to prove me wrong. But the way he was able to change that culture and then spread that culture,
boy, no kidding,
throughout the American Southwest and parts beyond eventually, is remarkable. When you see what the Leach tree did in Norman and Lubbock and Stillwater,
state of Texas,
and yeah, just throughout this, and really it still hasn't. I mean, everything's changed. A lot of things have changed, but the general idea: spread the field vertically, horizontally, make the defense cover this much grass instead of that much grass. That's still the concept of football. And Hal Mumme and Mike Leach were the guys that are as responsible for that as anybody. So for Stoops to recognize that, and I always thought Stoops, his rationale for hiring Mike Leach is one of the best coaching advice or wisdoms that you can think of, which they said, why'd you hire Mike Leach? He said, I just wanted to hire somebody that gave me a lot of trouble. When I was coaching Florida, who gave me trouble? It wasn't Alabama, and it wasn't LSU, and it wasn't Georgia, and it wasn't all these guys with the great ball players. It was Kentucky.
Tim Couch.
Tim Couch.
And you know what? I've tried to put that to use. I think that's good advice for all coaches. You know, when I put it to use in fourth down situations. You know, and this ties back in with Leach unrelatedly, but Leach loved going for it on fourth down. And we're seeing more and more NFL and college and high school coaches forever punted way too often. Way too often.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a gamble to punt on 4th and 1. It's a gamble not to.
Yeah.
And when I think about fourth down decisions, if I'm watching, let's say, I don't care. Let's say Weatherford Clinton. We'll take the OU OSU stuff out of it. Weatherford Clinton.
Custer County.
If you're a Weatherford fan and you want to beat Clinton, and Clinton has the ball, and let's say Clinton is at midfield, and it's 4th and 2. What do you want Clinton to do?
Fine.
You're a Weatherford fan. What do you want Clinton to do on 4th and 2? You want him to punt.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't want him to go for it. Punt it and give the ball back to us. So if you're Clinton, why are you punting?
Yeah.
The other team wants you to punt. That's what. And I think coaches forever, that's changing dramatically, but forever coaches were just so, got to punt on 4th and 1, got to punt on 4th and 2. The actual opposite is the truth, is it's another opportunity. And I think of Bob Stoops and what gave me trouble, and just on all football decisions.
But you know,
What gives me trouble?
Two things you bring up there bring to mind. You wrote an article one time, and I can't remember the reference point to it, but you pointed out that, hey, if you're a passing team, everybody says, oh, you need to run the ball. If you're not having any success running the ball, but you can make a 3 or 4 yard out every time, then why run the ball? I think you pointed that out one time. And then also on top of that, if you think about it, before Mike Leach, when was there ever a time where you heard a coach or defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator say, let's let him score here with 1:12 left so we get the ball back?
Right.
But until Leach, I'd never heard that in my life.
Yeah, we saw that. The first time I saw it was in that Packer Bronco Super Bowl.
I was going to bring that up. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right at the end. I don't know if that was 97 season or 98, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
98.
98. So the Packers tie game, with like a minute left. The Packers let them score just because the math, the old days, I could understand it. Field goal kickers are not automatic, but anymore in the NFL, it's automatic to make a 25-yard field goal. So, yeah, one thing Leach helped do was scrape the crust off coaches' imaginations and made them realize you have a lot of options. Let's exercise them.
And, it goes back to that, and Barry Switzer preached it in his book, Play the Percentages. And there were a certain set of percentages that you lived it like the gospel.
Now, and let me say this concerning Switzer, like he used to win the toss and kick off. That's what he did that all the time. But one thing is in 1975, when teams would score, I don't know, really good offenses would score 20% of the time they had the ball. Well, now it's 50% of the time.
Yeah.
So if you punt, you're giving away a big chunk of the game there. You're costing yourself potential points. And also when you got Leroy Selman playing defensive tackle, that helps too.
A couple of comments from the Facebook line. Barry, our sideline reporter and owner of Clinton Liquor in Clinton, Oklahoma, sideline reporter for the Red Tornadoes, says Clinton goes and scores. And then also, that's a dig at me. But then also Dan Narva up in Michigan wanted to know if you remembered any truth that Switzer was almost hired by the Spartans when he was an assistant at OU and somewhat forced OU's hand to make him the head coach. Is that anything that jogs the memory?
It doesn't jog my memory. I know that he had a lot of interest when he was an assistant coach. A lot of different people were after him. He may have written about that in his book.
Yeah, I'd have to go a little back.
But he's got, yes, he definitely, he's talked about that he's, he had opportunities, but he sensed that Oklahoma was doing something special.
Yeah.
With Jim McKenzie originally, and then Chuck Fairbanks, and then of course Switzer took it to even higher heights.
Well, so now with the Tulsa World, Barry, obviously SEC Media Days coming up July 15th. OU, Brent Venables will be on the 16th schedule, scheduled for the 16th. They're going to be in Dallas at the Omni. So you'll obviously be down there covering that and talk about this new transition for the Sooners. Sooner faithful believe they're going to go in and hold pat. The rest of the world maybe not necessarily. Do they have the guns, so to speak, to go in and actually compete in the SEC, and not even just this year?
Yeah, I think OU is going to be fine in the SEC. OU's problem is not the SEC. OU's problem is Georgia. That's OU's problem, and maybe Alabama.
That's everyone's problem.
Nick Saban did the Sooners a big solid, and everybody else, by leaving town. The problem OU had is in 21 when they joined. They joined the conference of King Kong, Alabama.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden they join it. Then before they get there, Godzilla had moved in too, Georgia. So the SEC's dominance and power and reputation, it's not a widespread. Everybody's tough. The idea that Ole Miss is somehow better than Oklahoma State over, a course of years, that's nonsense. The idea that, that, I don't know, Missouri is better than Kansas State, well, that's just silly. I mean, that's just silly. But Alabama and Georgia, that's a different deal. So I
would
think
throw LSU in there also.
LSU, although they go up and down, you're right. LSU, when they get up, they're on that level.
Rebuilding year.
They're coming back. You always know LSU's coming back. I think OU's going to be fine with SEC. They're SEC ready. They're just not Georgia ready, and maybe Alabama ready.
I don't think half the teams in the NFL are Georgia ready.
That's right. That's the problem. But I think, they got a terribly tough schedule, having to go to Missouri, Ole Miss, Auburn, and LSU. If they can go 2-2 in those games, it's a wonderful year. And the other problem OU has is right when they picked as the time to go into the SEC is when Texas got good again. Just bad, dumb luck.
Yeah, they would have been great.
Yeah, but we know that's not going to last long.
Been a 2018 transition. So
all these SEC guys who hadn't been paying attention, they just keep talking about how great Texas is. And, Texas in the last couple of years, they've moved up, but until 2 years ago, or maybe even last year, Texas had the 6th best record in the Big 12 over the course of like 12 seasons. Yeah. And they were below TCU, K-State, Baylor, OSU, and OU. So, but they're good now. I'm not saying they're not good now. They're a load, and that's just another problem. So it's some bad timing for Oklahoma, but over the long haul, they're going to be fine if they can solve the Georgia dilemma. But otherwise, they're going to be fine.
Well, and college football can be cyclical. OU had a ride near the top, if not at the top, through their conference for sure. But that brings me to my final question for you. And Brent Venables comes in after the Lincoln Riley debacle. I think Jeremy and I were talking about the Texas A&M baseball coach and how these guys on these transition moves, when they take another job, it becomes glaringly obvious to look back and see where they slipped up or didn't pay attention to enough detail, maybe with their former employer in the last few games. I thought Lincoln Riley obviously had kind of mailed it in a way with some of his squads there in that 2021 season, but Brent Venables comes in. I don't think you'll ever have to accuse him of mailing in anything, regardless of what he does. You've known him for a long time. He got the extension here recently. Is he the guy to keep OU and take them to any sort of new heights?
Well, I don't think anybody knows yet, including OU, but I think the signs are generally positive. The recruiting seems to be going great. The defensive mentality and defensive emphasis has switched. I think in 2024, we're going to see OU better on defense than offense for the first time in forever. And I think some of those things are, the relationship building seems to be premium. Yeah. Although those are the things you want, and those are the important things. I think Brent had some learning curve as a head coach, but year 2 was clearly way better than year 1. Sure. The close games, they weren't losing every close game. And so those kinds of things. So I think that the signs are generally positive. He does have a tough assignment because the schedule is very difficult in 24. It's going to be difficult in 25 because they're not flipping. They're just flipping the mirror of who you're playing. You're going to go to them if they were coming to you. Yeah. So they don't get Vanderbilt and Mississippi State next, in 25. They got another year of all those Sabretooths. But I'm generally optimistic about Oklahoma football. I had Paul Feinbaum on my video podcast the other day, and Paul he's pretty optimistic about OU. He thinks they're SEC ready, and he said they're going to do fine. And I tend to agree. It's not going to be. I don't know if they'll make it to Atlanta anytime soon for the SEC title game. There's 16 teams in the league now. It's 2 make it. It's going to be tough.
That is.
Used to be 1 out of 5 made it in the SEC, and then 1 out of 6, and then 1 out of 7. Now it's 1 out of 8 make it. But the playoffs opened up. I think OU is a very good candidate to make the playoff this year. I think if OU goes 9-3, I think there's a good chance they'll be in. Yeah. So they might could get to 9-3. So I'm reasonably optimistic.
New days, and me and Jeremy will be here with it. We usually do a wrap up on our podcast on Saturday nights during college football season. Always an eventful time there. So, anyways, but if Jeremy's not too wiped out from attending games, he still lives in Norman. I moved away from Norman, so. But anyways, well, listen, Barry, man, best of luck to you at the Tulsa World, and obviously you have some multimedia content going. You mentioned you do have a podcast there with the World.
Right. Yeah. And
Okay.
then just debuting, I think today actually is going to be posted. And that's Paul Feinbaum was my first guest. So
Wow.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Considering you had the mecca of SEC media on your podcast, we sure appreciate you coming on ours, and great to hear from you. Great to meet you via Zoom call, and you know, like I said, I've always been a fan of your writing, always been a fan of your work, and we'll look forward to you continuing that and doing a great job covering sports in the state of Oklahoma. So,
hey, thanks. Let me say one thing.
Yeah.
Love Western Oklahoma. Love Weatherford, Clinton, Elk City. Just love always going out to Western Oklahoma. So great to be with you guys. And Jeremy, tell your mother I said hello.
Will do. Thank you for coming on with us.
You bet.
All right. He's Berry Tramel, now of the Tulsa World, formerly of the Daily Oklahoman, joining us here. And we appreciate him for that. Jeremy, we were way over and just got so good there. Talking.
That's all right. That was awesome. That was great.
It was great. And probably one of the highlight guests of our program here on the Law Dog Sports Weekend Big Show. So anyways, what do you got going for this weekend? It's hot. I know beating the heat will be number one, but anything else that you can think of?
Probably some yard work. I don't know. Got to go out there and see what the missus has for me for this morning.
Yeah, and totally whiffed on a comment from Max Patton. He wanted us to ask Barry if he thinks there'll be more pressure on Mike Gundy with OU not in the conference anymore. I would say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Your
It's
Super
doubled
Bowl
now.
game that you can always get your players up for is gone.
Uh-huh.
On two ends, really, because they showed up a lot against Texas as well.
Maybe they can get up for Utah.
Yeah, Utah, Arizona, those are going to be big matchups. Arizona's probably got to be considered a somewhat of a favorite to contend for the title.
Definitely. Arizona, Utah.
Tech should be
not
better.
Tech.
OSU and Kansas State, I would say probably.
Yeah.
And who knows what Dave Aranda can pull out of Baylor at times. So anyways, but listen, we are way over. This is going to be a long episode, so it'll take some editing and uploading. So if you don't see it on the platforms at Law Dog Sports and lawdogsports.com real soon, we will get it up there real quick. And Jeremy, man, thanks for coming on again this weekend, and we'll be back next week with actually, I tell you what, I thought about this, and I'll just bring this up, and our fans will know we're going to take next week off.
Okay.
It's the holiday weekend. The 4th is on a Thursday. There's not going to be much going on, so we will take a vacation week, so to speak, for the podcast, and we will return, and that will be on, let me see, the 12th. We'll set it for July 12th. We'll be back. But, man, have a great holiday, and it was good to hear from you, and thanks for being a part of this big episode.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. It's probably the most fun I've had on here. I could listen to him tell stories all day.
Definitely.
That was so good.
We could have probably gone another hour easy. And
right.
He let us, but man,
I know.
Felt terrible keeping him as long as we did. All right. This is the Weekend Big Show. He's Jeremy Schroeder, ruler of the airways. I'm Chuck Ramsey, the Law Dogs. Be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Law Dog Sports, as well as our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Law Dog Sports. Be safe out there. Don't text and drive, and sure don't drink and drive, and we'll talk to you real soon.